The state's health department already regulates food and drinks. That's the power that the state is going to wield here. The Parson administration plans to label any intoxicating hemp products as adulterated, meaning any restaurant or store that's caught selling these could fail a health inspection and potentially could have to shut down. On Wednesday, the owners of Slap Happy Hemp Farm in Hermann, Missouri, hosted several state lawmakers and veterans, hoping to change opinions on an industry the state government now considers a dangerous public health threat.
If the hemp products go away, then their access goes away, their rights go away, everything they fought for goes away just with a stroke of a pen by a governor.
Grady's company sells this hemp THC infused beverage, but he'll have to stop as of Sunday or could face a violation. The Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services also plans to go to court for an embargo order blocking imports. Governor Parson had filed an emergency rule to enforce the ban on sales, but it was rejected by the Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft, who said the governor failed to meet the requirements for this to be considered an emergency. The most recent data from a nationwide network of poison control centers shows 42 exposures of this type of cannabis were reported in Missouri in 2022. That's across all age groups. That represents 0.1% of all calls to Missouri poison control centers that year. Rick DePonte leads the Missouri chapter of Veterans of Foreign Wars and said he no longer believes these products are dangerous.
I've kind of changed my views on it a little bit. I was even against medical marijuana at the time. Now I'm not against medical marijuana. And so I just came out here to get further education because I think that's what we really need is we need the education part of it, period.
The health department's enforcement rule now moves through the months-long non-emergency process. When imposed, the rule will ban the making and selling of any food or drinks containing the unregulated THC and also bans the sale of all psychoactive versions of it in any establishment with a liquor license. In Jefferson City, Joe McLean, WGEM News.